Okay, we've arrived at Mrs. Jones's house. She has been explaining issues in regards to her lavatory, that sometimes she's smelling sewer gas in here. Maybe sometimes she's hearing a gurgling sound in here. Sometimes the water doesn't drain appropriately. It drains slow. You've done some examining on running the water. Sometimes if the water backs up and you swirl your finger, it'll kind of go down. It's intermittently draining. So part of that diagnosis is obviously checking under here to see what's going on. And right away, we notice that we have what's called an S-trap. So we are in our diagnosis process right now. And looking at this, if you can see the S by turning, let's see if this works here with the camera, turning your head sideways, you can see that S shape, right? We can see this S shape. Now, anytime we see this structure of piping below the cabinet without a vent coming off here, this is a problem. If you notice in the back here, we have a sand tee back here, and it has a vent coming off the top. That's an appropriate way to vent off of a trap arm. But anytime we run into a situation where we have this S shape, if we turn our head sideways, right, this is a problem. It's a problem for basically what it does when you have this going on is it does not protect the trap seal, right? So the trap seal, the water vapor barrier that sets in here, when water pushes into this, it's going to go up, over, and what happens is it causes a little tidal wave of water through here, and it has no way to breathe. So what will happen is, as this water's draining, it'll hit the back of this here and cause a siphon as the water goes down, or sometimes just an airlock. So if that water gets in, it's no different than putting your thumb on a straw in your glass, lifting it up, and then the water stays in the straw and then you let it go, right? It's the same concept, but the thumb in this instance is the water here in the P-trap. What it'll do is kind of suck that water out of it to drain the pipe. So this is your thumb here. It'll suck that water out to drain the pipe, and sometimes it only sucks out just enough of the trap, which allows a little bit of air to pass through this area back and forth, not just in. As soon as it's done draining, then you have this vapor barrier broke, and what will happen is we'll get intermittent smell, right? This is the sewer, this is the atmosphere of the home, and by having an S-trap in place, we will siphon this down intermittently, and also running other fixtures in this bathroom will pull air from here if it needs to breathe. And what will happen is we'll get intermittent sewer gas, we'll get airlocks where the sink won't drain, and we'll get gurgling sounds and things of that nature. So outside of the drain needing to be cleaned maybe as well, we never want to rule that out, replacing this S-trap with an appropriate air admittance valve venting setup assembly should be a part of our options. So that's our initial diagnosis, and what we'll do is go ahead and build up some options for our customer and then explain to them exactly what's going on and get this repaired for them. This is a big deal. S-traps are no go anymore. Okay, now we're going to go over the items and tools and items you're going to need to go ahead and remove this S-trap and install an appropriate assembly so the sink drains correctly. We're going to need some, now take side note, this could be cast iron we're dealing with, this could be ABS that we're dealing with. There could be multiple types of materials, so your connections to those materials and solvent welds and mechanical connectors could all vary, and that's more of a practical skills class that we'll be teaching. But in this scenario, we're going to show you what we need today to take care of this job. So this here, we got some 1.5 inch PVC piping here. That's a PPE. Trash bag's always good to have around, and we'll show you why. That keeps you organized and cleaned up in Mrs. Jones's home. We have a Sawzall here. Again, however you choose to cut PVC is fine. A pair of channel locks, tape measure. We do have some pipe dope and tape. We have an extra slip joint extension tube. We're going to reutilize the trap that's in there. It looks fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We have a glue and primer, and one of the big things here with primer is if you're priming pipe inside of a house, you do not need purple primer unless it is getting inspected, right? If you know you prime it, you're fine, everything's good to go. But if the inspector's coming in to look at everything, you want to make sure you have your colored primer if it's required in your municipality. Again, your glue, we just have another adapter here. This is just a bushing with a 2-inch no hub coupling, which I prefer no hub couplings because they're stiffer. But remember, just a side note, anytime you're going from 2 different types of pipe, it needs to be a Fernco. So these will be against code if you go, from cast iron to PVC, and etc. We got a T-wrench here. This is a torque wrench. This is made to put on that no hub appropriately. That's kind of a cheaper one. And then we have our air admittance valve. So we'll skim through that real quick. We got 2 air admittance valves here. So what these are little check valves, right? They let air in. Air goes into this device as the sink drains, but it will not let smell out, right? We have 2 types here. This one is a fixture vent. This is a little cheaper guy, totally appropriate for one fixture, right? You have DFUs on all of these, right? So like this one here is a 24 drain fixture units. So this is more of like a stack vent. So you could vent a whole bathroom off of this, right? This is where this is appropriate. This could also be used under this sink. It'd be overkill though. But this little guy, this little auto vent is totally appropriate. They work great for a little lavatory like this. So again, if you're doing a whole bathroom group, yeah, this is fine for this case here. We do have our trap adapter and we do have a santee, as you can see here. And then we got some different connections for these. So our air admittance valve adapts by iron pipe thread, right? 1.5 inches. We have an 1.5 inch iron pipe thread PVC female adapter with a solvent weld. This will glue right on the top. Or sometimes you have these around. This is a thread iron pipe, female iron pipe, right? By 2-inch or 1.5 inch option, which is kind of neat. You can actually glue up in that. Kind of looks funky. So just having those adapters readily available as you need those. And then you can see with this one here, it does the same thing. We can glue 2-inch pipe in here, or we can glue 1.5 inch. Again, this is a larger one and a little overkill. So on the whole, that's what you're gonna need to do this job. Okay, as you can see here, we've went ahead and transferred all of our items from the table to our work area. Obviously, our floor protection and all of our regular setup to work on a lavatory is complete. And we're gonna go ahead and get our PPE on, right? We wanna make sure that we're protecting ourselves when we're working on this stuff. It can be nasty. I typically prefer to wear a cloth glove when I'm working on this and cutting pipe, but I'm gonna do the rubber gloves today. Just taking those extra steps and precautions of staying clean and sanitary, right? We obviously do not want to be getting sewage and things like that in our cuts, right? So taking those steps when we're in the customer's house is always good. Cannot stress that enough. We also have our safety glasses here. We want to put those on. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So the first thing we're going to do is obviously take the trap apart. I'm going to try to give good camera angles on this. It is hard with the GoPro on the head. This is something we are working on, getting better at. So what we're going to do is go ahead and disassemble this. Got our bucket. We do have our pan behind us, but in this case we're not cleaning a drain, so we're not going to have a ton of water. So we just want to get this done and out of the way. Let's go ahead and take this guy off here. Now again, we're going to reuse this trap. I find it appropriate to just go ahead and, well, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just pull that whole assembly out of there. So we're going to grab our torque wrench, our T-wrench here. We're going to come down here and we're going to loosen this guy up here. This is a cheaper wrench, so sometimes it's not ideal. If you had a nut driver, an appropriate nut driver, this would be ideal. This is not so much, but we do have our tools all readily accessible. That's another good point. They're available, readily available, right? Readily means It's right here. We can grab it, which means we do not have to go back to the truck 15 times to get tools, because we have everything we need here, at least everything we think we need, right? So the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time it's going to take care of everything. We have everything here. We're just going to go ahead and break this apart and get it off. We're going to go ahead and go back with the no hub coupling. Now we could very well have just cut this off right here and put a new coupling on there, glued a coupling on. That would have been totally appropriate. But we're just going to get this out of the way today and set it out of our way. And we're going to go with this new one here. So there's a few different ways you can do this. What do they say? A few different ways to skin a cat. Not really sure what that means. It's probably not a good thing. You know where those sayings come from back in the day, right? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get that on there. Now all I did is put a 2 by 1.5 inch bushing in that. Okay. I'm just gonna take this no hub band, get it started. Now no hub bands can be tricky. If you've installed enough of them, you'll know that they don't always go on appropriately. So it's best, it's like almost like putting a tire on, right? We want to evenly distribute the band, right? And then go back and forth, tighten this side, then tighten the other side, right? And that gives a much better connection than just tightening one side down first. A lot of guys will use a drill with an impact, which is totally fine. You just don't want to overdo it. Do a 12 volt, something smaller. Give that little, you know, but you don't want to pop the band. You want to always check a band with your T-wrench when you're done to assure that it has the proper torque on it. It can have too much torque, but at the same time, too much torque will cause the band to pop. So that's what these are designed for. These little wrenches to say, hey, it's right where you want it at. It's good to go, and you'll get a little pink like that, right? You can see the rubber's kind of growing on me here on the top, and that's totally appropriate. It ain't gonna hurt nothing. The thing ain't gonna leak. We got that good. We got a good connection right there. Okay, so now we're gonna take this trap, and we're just gonna reutilize it. If I could find my trap arm, it's over here. We're gonna take this trap arm nut back off here. We're even gonna pull this nut and ferrule off here. And again, in our trap adapter course, we'll go over specifics and things of that nature on what we should use to adapt, trap adapting, right, from tubular into our Schedule 40 piping, right? So there's lots of ways to adapt. You'll run into so many scenarios, right? So that's can be a real in-depth course on things to do there. So we won't go into that too much here today. This course is just basically covering how to remove an S-strap appropriately and reinstall an air admittance valve. So what I like to do is I push that all the way up on my tailpiece, right? It's up. Now what I'm gonna do is bring it down about halfway, right there, okay? And I'm gonna aim it back here. So I did that so I have room to adjust it up and down once I make my final solvent weld glue joint. So I got a little room to work, right? So taking your tape measure, you can now do a little math, right? Math is your friend. I'm a little out of practice, I'll be honest with you, but so what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure from the deck, okay, up to our trap arm. Okay, we got 14, looks like we got about, let's just call it 14.5, because we know, looky here, let's make it easy on ourselves, 14.5, right? Adjust that down, right, 14.5. And then what we're gonna do is figure out what our makeup is here. Looks like I got about, 3/4 of an inch. That 3/4 comes down, about to the bottom of that band, right? So it looks like we got 2 3/4 up to the bottom of that band. So we're gonna minus, right, that 2 3/4, right, from that 14.5, right? So that'll give us our makeup all the way up to the center of our T. So I'm just gonna do that to show you here. 1, 2 3/4 makes it 11 3/4, right? From here up to this elevation here, right? So it's 11 3/4, right? So then we'll just take this T right here, okay, which is going to go here for our air admittance valve addition, right? And I said 11 3/4. Well, we know that we want to take a piece. We got to minus this little bit from here to there, right? So I'm just going to take that 11 3/4. This is what I always do. And if you look at that 11 3/4 is right on the center of that horizontal run, right? That fixture drain we're going to tie right in the trap. And you can see that I have 10 right at the makeup of my hub. Look at that. So you see the 11 3/4 lining up there, and then the 10. So my piece is going to be 10 inches, okay? Now, there's a ton of different ways to do this. You could be this guy too, right? There's these guys, and this is fine and appropriate. I don't care. Whatever gets the job done, right? You can hold this guy up like this, right? And say, man, that's where I want to be at right there, you know? And cut your piece just like that, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and hack my piece. I got a scrap piece right here, which is always appropriate to have around. We'll cut that, see how on I was. Now, this is where you can be smart and not make a mess. Right, save yourself some cleanup. You want to ream the pipe, not tearing your glove, right? And then what we're going to do is go ahead and get our glue ready. You can see this glue here is and again, we're working with clear. It really is appropriate. There's a few things when working with glue and primer in the home. It's having it in a container like this, right? And after you get done gluing, to always put the lids back on. That's one really good tip, because it's very easy to tip over. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and prime up our sand tee here. Put a little glue on there, right? Looks like I got a mosquito in here as my friend right now. And then what I like to do, I always like to do the writing out. It's something that I've always done. And I think as you go along and grow, you will find that it just looks more aesthetically pleasing. Also, if you're supposed to be installing a certain type of piping and it's getting inspected, it is good for the code official to see that pipe, right? You don't want to hide it from them or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that in the direction. Let me see, I think I had a little short piece there. That really won't help. Sometimes you can get what's called a gun. They call it a gun. You put it in there like that, and that'll help you shoot it. Let me look at it here and look down it. And you can turn it and shoot it directly at where you're working, right? So now we've glued that in. Looks like it's rising up a little crooked, but that's probably from the band. Again, we're just trying to take care of, there's that little bug flying around. Okay, so now we have that piece there. So now we're going to do our trap arm extension here. Right now, there's a couple options we can do here. We can put in a longer piece of pipe here, which is always preferred, because we got bigger volume here, right? This is always preferred. Or if you don't have that, you can put this shorter here with a slip joint extension tube if you had to do it. Not really recommended. So we're now going to prime this guy up. A little bit of glue. Again, we got our drop cloths down. We're not getting any glue in the customer's cabinet. We're trying to keep glue off of us as well, which is always important. I still have a bug flying around. This will be on video forever. So now we'll go ahead, glue this up. And we could shift that a little bit, and I'll give you an example of that. See, I just got a little bit right there on the casework, that glue, and I want to clean that up immediately. Last thing you want to do is damage the customer's cabinet. I'm going to loosen this band a little bit to show you how to kind of tweak that bushing that's in there. Let's just give it a little tweak. That way our pipe is vertical and it doesn't look so rough, right? That looks really good right there. So now we'll go ahead and pop that back into place. Pipe should never be installed in a stress point, right? You always want to have it aesthetically pleasing, vertical, you know, parallel with the cabinet. So you want to try to practice that. That'll turn you into a craftsman over time, looking at those little things. So now, up next, is we're going to put our air admittance valve in. So we're going to choose to go ahead and go with just the fixture air admittance valve. And we have that female adapter right here. So tape, dope, tape, really, that is up to you, but it does need some type of thread sealant protected on there. It's vital that this is sealed up. I always like to do a little tape myself. You only need 3 wraps with this. Just to let you know, you always want to have it turned like that and never the other way, because it'll get longer. It gets shorter this way as you put it on. If you have it the other way, if you have this flipped over when you're doing it, it gets longer, right? So have it this way, it gets shorter like that, okay? Done. Get that out of the way. We're gonna go ahead and put a little bit of dope on it. A lot of people think that this is just to seal the pipe. It does do that, but it also protects the threads and allows for the threads to wrench in easier. You can also take this apart easier later down the road as well, having this stuff on there. So, well, I guess it depends on what type of sealant you're using. This one right here is totally fine. We are not tuning a piano. This is not potable water, so we don't really have to worry about really the contents of it at all. Just need something on there, so we're going to go ahead and tighten that on there, hand tighten, right? We'll go ahead and glue it on this piece of pipe right here. Then we're going to cut a little piece. Now, we usually want to have these up as high in the cabinet as we can, okay? A vent, you want it to be as high as it can, and basically the reason for that is when we stick it up in the cabinet here, okay, is that if this drain runs slow, okay, and we dump a bowl and it fills up and that water, it's going down, but at the same time it's coming up into the vent area, close to the vent. If it's going up because of the restriction down here, because we're pushing down with head pressure, it's not going to allow that to function correctly. So getting it as high as you can up in the cabinet is always ideal. So that's good practice to take your air admittance valve up as high as you can get it. I think by code, and that's just manufacturer recommendations too, you want to follow that too, but I think you want to have at least 4 inches. Let's see if I can find my tape measure. You want to have at least 4 inches above here with these guys. Now, this one here, I'm going to go, since I've already glued it up, I know my overall length on this one. I'm going to go about 7 inches up. Let's go 6.5 so we ain't fighting it to get it in there. So I can actually go to the top of this guy here, come on down, and that goes 6.5 inches right there. Again, I'm going to take my saws all over this pan right here. Let the blade do the work, right? It's not the best blade that I have there with me today, but we'll go ahead and take our rag there and not tear our glove. So again, we're going to put this air admittance valve on now. Now, I could have put the trap on first. It doesn't matter either way. But another good trade secret, I guess you would say, I don't know if it's a secret, but right now I'm running the stack or the trunk, right? This is it's considered a stack, right? This is a stack coming up. You always run your stack before you run any branches, okay? Remember that. This is not, and this is a small level, but if this is a trunk line you're running through a house, you run your branches after your trunk is complete and fastened into place, right? Your trunk's done, it's parallel, it's pretty, all your branch fittings or Y connections are put in place, but you don't have the actual fixture drain run off of it yet. And the reason you do that is you can keep your trunk line or vertical stack straight, right? You can keep it straight and looking nice. And then when you go to run your branches, you're not pulling it out of place. If I went to hook up that trap, I'd be pulling this, right? You want to finish running your vertical. So that's just a good tip. This is with running copper, any DWV, you know, soil pipe, anything like that. Run your trunk or vertical first and make your connections, then run your branch piping. Branch piping comes last, okay? So now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and just pull this guy off here again. So I was using that for measurement purposes. We're gonna grab this, and we're gonna grab the appropriate adapter, which we have this reducing ferrule here, which will be just fine. We're gonna go and stick that trap arm in. Get it going here. And see, we brought that schedule 40 over close to the trap. That's what we want, right? That gives us volume. This could be an 1.5" trap too if you wanted to put one on. That does not matter. If there's an 1.25" here, obviously if you're supposed to be giving the customer a new P-trap, you want to make sure you're doing that. But just make sure the tubular's taken care of. Now in this case, I don't have a level with me, and this kind of brings up a fun joke. How do you tell this is something I always say, how do you tell the install plumber from the service plumber? Well, the install plumber usually has a tape measure and level with them. And it's, you know, typically when you're doing service plumbing, you're doing these little repairs, but install plumbers are always running a lot of a pipe, so they're always having those tools with them. In this case, it's so small you can really just eyeball all this stuff that's not even necessary, right? You really don't even need a tape. There's such small stuff that we're dealing with here. But ideally, you want to make sure that this has pitch on it, right? But we can look at that very quickly and see that it's got pitch on it and it looks good. So we put our trap back in there. We're going to obviously, this is what I like to do. It's not what you have to do. Some people put a little dope on their P-traps, and some people will cry and scream about that. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you put dope on your P-traps. The way that I see it is if a guy wants to put a little dope on his P-trap and it makes him happy, let him do it. You know, it's okay with me. It doesn't bother me. So, okay, we've ran a little water. We don't have any leaks. So we wanted to make sure everything was working okay before we start cleaning up and putting our tools up. So now, this is a good time to pull some of this stuff out of the cabinet and start your cleanup process. We'll kind of do a little bit of that in this video as a good reminder on cleanup's just as important. So obviously getting all your tools in an area and out of your way, and your parts. Making sure all your glue, your solvents are set closed up, vital, right? You don't want to track any of this through the customer's house. So we have a little water here. We're going to go ahead and just put that in there. And again, this can go in the toilet. So bringing that glue and primer in and out of the house, this is the best practice. You cannot go wrong with that. You will not drip anything through the customer's home, which is vital. So now we're going to do our quick clean down process. Looking at that P-trap under there, it's looking pretty rough, right? So we're going to go ahead and clean that new install up. We don't want it to look rough for the customer, you know. Again, we've been messing with sewage, right? So we're going to take a little time to make sure things are cleaned up well. Things splash on the walls when you're working, and you might not even know it. Taking that extra second to make sure the cabinet is cleaned up is important. As you can see, we've went ahead and got all of our tools out of the home. So we are picking up our drop cloths, and you cannot, I cannot stress this enough, is booties go on before we take up our drop cloths. So this is where the trash bag comes in, and we're gonna repeat this over and over again, talking about this. Having this with you is important because you can go ahead and take care of your mess before you throw it in your truck, right? So we're gonna go ahead and take that pan and shake it out. set that aside. As you can see, which we don't have a lot here, there's not a lot of mess, but we do have some PVC shavings in here. So simply by taking that guy there, taking an extra second and putting that in your trash bag like such, and giving it a little shake, right? Opening it up. This is probably ideal to do in your truck, which you can do that, you know. But now you're getting rid of all that stuff out of there, and you're not getting it all completely in the customer's house, right? Now, that is a little bit of debris, but that's just an example of going ahead and taking care of your mess, right? So you don't track it through the customer's house. Because typically when we get into major repairs and we're getting into the wall, this can be really a messy process, right? So just taking those extra steps to get rid of all that trash. And again, this is something you could do in your truck, but you want to do it before you stow away your floor protection, because you're going to be taking this in someone's house again. So now's the best time to get those gloves off, right? Those gloves are sweaty and your hands get sweaty in there, kind of nasty. So we're going to go ahead and do our fill the bowl and dump, make sure everything's cleaned up nicely. We did not work on top here with Mrs. Jones's cabinet, but we're still going to go ahead and clean up and make sure things are smelling good. And now we're going to get down here and check for leaks. So we're going to go ahead and stop up that. And we're going to go ahead and dump that bowl and check for leaks before we leave. And just to be sure of myself, I'm going to snug that up. Okay, now with a dry hand, right, like we said, is we're going to go ahead and touch everything with our hands. Dry hand is how you find leaks. You wipe and you check, okay? Wipe and check. You cannot do this. I can't stress this here enough that you have to make sure there's 0 leaks on Mrs. Jones's sink, because again, if we come back, that's a bad experience for the customer, a bad experience for you and the company. So we've inspected that and everything looks really good. We have no leaks. We got good flow established. We've cleaned everything up. And now we're going to take a couple minutes to go over it with the customer. So this is last but not least. Of course, we're going to go over this with the customer, explain everything that we did, how it's functioning now, and the difference we've made with our new install. We can clearly see things are draining well, moving well. There's a probability that you could have a sewer gas smell. You always want to let the customer know that, you know, as a professional, you're very, very sure that this solved the problem. However, sewer gas is an intermittent thing, and it can come from multiple places. There could be a screw in a pipe behind the wall and things like that. So, but your gut's telling you, you're 99% sure you feel like you solved her problem today. Obviously, with the gurgling that she said before, and now it's not gurgling. So you just want to go over those things with the customer, let them know what you've done, what you've completed, show them your work, of course, right? And then all along, we've been documenting this with our field software, taking pictures and leaving notes for the office. So that basically covers the whole process here of changing out an S-trap and putting in a proper air admittance valve assembly. Thanks.